Hey folks, welcome to episode 104 of A Pint with Seaniebee. I just want to take some time to fill you in on the whole Patreon situation. Patreon is a respected way for podcasters to start monetizing their service. I feel a bit weird, as I said before, about asking people to contribute. It works as a monthly subscription where you're asked to just give your credit card details, a bit like Netflix, and pledge €1, $1, $5, $10, whatever you can afford to keep the podcast on the road. Since I've started, I've been asking friends, and a lot of you have come forward and supported the podcast, which is amazing. And I'm really appreciative to all of you who have done so. The whole concept of monetizing podcasts is fraught, for want of a better word. There's something like 250,000 podcasts are released every week into the wild, and that's a lot of people looking for sponsorship or support. The other approach to monetization is through advertising. Even as an ex-ad man myself, I have resisted that. That's not to say that if someone came and offered me $2,000 per podcast, I wouldn't bite their hand off. But the sort of numbers that you're being offered in terms of sponsorship by advertisers, which also would include a long interminable message like this, talking about Squarespace or Blue Apron or Audible.com or mattresses. And, it just, to me, feels a bit grubby. And one of the reasons, as I keep saying, that I think podcasts have actually come to the fore in the last few years is a really dramatic misread by the media companies of the world for the appetite that people have to in-depth, long-form radio for when they're in the gym, for when they're walking, for when they're on the bus, on the tube, wherever. We have an appetite as a species for longer stories and not the soundbite culture, the Twitter culture, and the sheep dip culture of American chat shows where you really only scratch the surface of a problem or an issue or a person. So I am asking people to help, and I am asking people to contribute. And if you can, great. You go to patreon.com/Seaniebee. You follow the prompts to become a patron. It'll ask you to give your credit card, and you then subscribe to a monthly amount. I'm very happy if you just make that monthly amount $1. Where does the money go? It will help keep the podcast tipping away. The podcast does have expenses attached to it. It has subscriptions to SoundCloud, who are my host. It has trips to London and hotels and stuff like that to pick up interviews. So it's not that I'm going to be making tons of money out of all of this, but it does really help. It's also anti-corporation. Basically, this is a cottage industry, the podcast industry, and will only really survive if listeners understand that they're not contributing to some big evil corporation like Rupert Murdoch, Fox News and all that kind of stuff, and instead are giving a small amount for what they believe a podcast is worth to the originator of the podcast. That's my plea, that's my request. If you have the money, if you have the time, it'll only take 3 minutes. And if you are a regular listener and you would like to support, I'd really, really appreciate it. Anyway, on to today's episode. It's episode 104, a good one today. A guy called Kes Gray. Kes Gray used to work in the ad business, and he's a self-confessed ideas junkie. He has a great story. He's now one of Britain's most preeminent children's book authors, and for a while there, a few years ago, every man and his mother were basically writing children's books as far as I could see. He does give a very interesting picture to any of you budding authors or children's books authors out there as to the reality behind monetizing children's books. Kes is also a guy who, when he left advertising, put a lot of his money and a lot of his time into trying to get lots of products and new ideas across lots of different categories, which we've all thought about doing. And he has some conciliatory lessons for us all. We spoke and sat down at the Kinsale Advertising Festival, the Sharks Awards, about a month ago. And so without further ado, this is a good one. I'm giving you Kes Gray. Amazing journey where he is now one of the preeminent children's book authors in the UK. He's got over 50 books to his name.
80 now.
80 now. Whatever I read in my research, it was 50. That was probably only 2 years ago. He's one of the most unique people I've ever heard speak, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm welcoming Kes Gray. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Much happier now I've got that over and done with.
Yeah, so we're at the Kinsale Advertising Festival in Cork in Ireland, and Kes was one of the keynote speakers here and just had the entire room in thrall about 3 hours ago, and I have never met him before, so this is our first meeting. You grew up in the 1960s. Let's get that out of the way. What was it like growing up in Essex in the 1960s? What was your childhood like?
I had a really happy childhood. I grew up on a housing estate called Molsham Lodge. My mum and dad had no money. But
what did they do?
My dad was a printer and my mum was a housewife. Later on in her life, she became a part-time M&S worker. My childhood was the kind of childhood that a lot of kids don't have anymore, in the sense that I used to do things that are probably now illegal, might have been illegal then. You know, I used to go birds nesting with my dad. We'd go into woods, we'd go into forests, we'd go into fields, and we'd be looking for birds' eggs, which I know is wrong, but actually I became, the countryside of me became kind of inseparable.
Birds nesting is collecting the eggs and
collecting
putting them
the
under
eggs.
Glass and having.
Yeah, my dad was a printer, so we had a printer's tray. That's what we'd put the eggs in, and then we'd leave them up there until somebody went up to service the boiler and trod all over them. That was the fate of a lot of bird's egg collections. But we used to go fossil hunting. I had a best friend across the road. He was born a week before me. We were inseparable, so were our families. We used to go over to a sand and quarry, and in those days you could just go into a quarry and go wherever you like of a weekend and just look for fossils. So I did that, a lot of football. Used to play football in the street and knock on the door and run. I used to do that.
Yeah. Were you any use football? Were you handy?
Well, actually, I was. I don't think I was actually, but I don't think you had to be good at football to be good at football in those days. I was a centre half. I was the school captain. One of my earliest memories of football was I was in the third year, and I was picked to play in the fourth year team, and I was rubbish. I was absolutely rubbish, and I remember coming back off the pitch, going into the cloakroom and listening to the fourth years going, what a pile of crap that kid is. And do you know what I did? I went home absolutely devastated, and I got up early the next morning and went back into the playground first thing, because that's when we used to play against the fourth years, third years against fourth years. I went back in and I thought, right, I'm going to show you what I can do, but with a proper ball, a tennis ball. Because obviously I was spotted by the fourth years with a tennis ball. The moment you put me on a pitch with a big ball, with a big ball, couldn't do it. I was terrified.
I had a terrible. I mean, it's interesting that you're framing your childhood as very happy. It doesn't happen a lot on the show, to be honest. I had an incident when I was about 8 or 7. We were playing Gaelic football in Croke Park, which is the Wembley of Ireland. And our team got to the final, and there was training 2 days before, and my mother was about to give birth to twins, and my dad said, you can't go training, and I was desolated because I was going, this is the last training before the thing. And in fairness to my dad, he worked a way of getting me to training. I scored 3 goals at training and 3 points, and I had a blinder. And we went to Croke Park, and I wasn't on the team. There were 2 coaches. One of the coaches was at training, the other one wasn't. We win the cup, and then we went to some place for minerals and sandwiches, and the other coach turned up, and he said, you know what, Sean? And I was 8. He said, if you'd been at training yesterday, we might have put you in the team. And the other guy was there, and the other guy went, no, he was at training. And I cried. I was so devastated with that meanness of that, and I had done as good as I could have done, and I wasn't put on the team, and I was like, I've never forgotten that little prick. Mr. Kern, if you're listening, Mr. McDonald, you were the one who was okay, but the idea that you've now wrapped yourself up as in children's books, and we're going to come to the journey as to how you got there. The importance of your childhood. I mean, listening to the adventure. You went on adventures. Kids don't do that anymore.
The thing about what's happened to kids over the years is their play parameters have shrunk massively. I think at the age of 6 or 7, I was walking 2 miles across a housing estate with my mate to school. We'd go to the woods, we'd make a den, we would go out on our bikes in the dark. I don't think it ever crossed my mum's mind or my dad's mind that we wouldn't come home. As a parent now, I mean, my kids are 28, 26 and 17 now, but you live in fear as a parent. You just think, I can't let my children go and do the things that I did. And I try to champion those things in my books. But if I'm honest, first I actually allowed my daughter to walk. I live in School Road. I live in School Road. So guess how.
In the question.
So guess how.
Where's
far
the school?
The school is
just up
in
the
my
road.
road. It's in my road. And I said, okay, you can walk to school. It's about a 100-yard walk.
Wow.
And she was probably in, year 6 or something. And I said,
just terrified.
Said, cheerio, see ya. And do you know what I did? The moment
Followed
she did, I hid. I went out and hid behind a post just to make sure she got there. And it was kind of counter to everything that I'd grown up with.
Well, I never had kids, possibly for that sort of reason, because I think I would mollycoddle. I'd be terrified that something terrible would happen to them.
Yeah.
And then probably stifle them, and then they'd hate me.
Yeah.
Your daughter hates you for another reason, which we're going to come back to later in the
God.
podcast.
Oh, God.
See, I remember everything.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go hugely into your advertising career because I want to talk about the rest of it. And I've had loads of ad people on this. I just want to say a few things about your advertising career. Kes has worked at probably some of the greatest advertising agencies and has made certainly 2 of my favourite ads. One is Dambusters for Carling Black Label. There'll be a link to that at the end of the podcast. Another one which I really loved when it came out, which you didn't mention today, which was the Prudential campaign, which I really love. I Want to Be Together Again. There's links to that. A bit like me, didn't want to set up his own agency, didn't want to become a board member. I think allergic to the internal politics, is that fair? And all the crap that goes with managing teams, and you just wanted to do ideas.
I just literally wanted to sit in a room, close the door, and have ideas. When I used to liken us to sausage machines. We'd produce a sausage, get it stamped on by research or whatever. Have another idea, have another idea, and I actually loved that. It didn't daunt me at all.
No, I loved it as well.
And I loved doing it. Prior to, I'm best known for Dambusters. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, my life as a creative was very, very simple and pure, really. I just used to sit in a room, have ideas, and once you cracked a brief or whatever, people would come into your room, run away with your ad, come back and go, hey, guys, it's made. They bought it. And there was a period in my career at WCRS where that was all that happened to me, really. Everything that I did, I liked, pretty much, and everything that I liked got made. That was heaven. But I think... you do get seduced by success. There's a little worm in your head that says, and it's a fault of the industry actually, because your job as a creative is to have good ideas. Your job as a creative is to do award-winning advertising. But when we do it, we just go, come on everybody, okay, receive me. I want a pay rise. I want a new car. I want this. I want that. It was lovely to be paid more money, but what I did find was that suddenly the game changed for me, because if you do a good ad, people jump on you. Agencies look around and go, we need him, we need her to come and work in our agency. As a children's author, if you have a degree of success as a children's author, suddenly people go, come and tell us why and how you write. How and why do you do that? What's your approach to it? I don't know. I don't think about it. Yeah. But as a creative director, you're supposed to kind of share that knowledge, that wisdom. And the moment you start to overthink anything that you do, you're kind of dead in the water, I think.
But you seem to be very... have a pure confidence in your ideas, and
I do.
And then they kind of fell, but you kept going.
Absolutely, because I'm a sausage machine. I just have another idea, and another, and another, and I knew instinctively that management wasn't for me. And I said to my art director, "Look, okay, I'll give it a year. If I don't like it, I'm off." I can remember we'd walk up and we'd look at the floor and go, "What's that?" And they go, "Oh, it's the think tank. It's a hole in the floor with a carpet squid in it." And it's going to help you have ideas, and you just think, no, it's not. It's not.
You have a football table and a slide as well.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I didn't really feel comfortable in that environment. I was now meeting clients. I was talking to clients. I suddenly found out about, I knew whether the client was... You'd almost know whether he was having problems with his wife and all that sort of thing, and I didn't need to know any of that stuff. But also, I like a creative challenge. And when you start to receive briefs that have 5 single-minded messages in one brief, I start to look at it and go, well, actually, I understand why they're doing that. Mm-hmm. Can I crack that? Can I solve that? Yeah, I could. But obviously, to the detriment of the ads that you're producing. I think at some point, you start looking around. You look at the work you're producing. It wasn't good enough, but I could defend it to the hilt, and I've always defended my work. And then you start to feel sorry for yourself, and then you start to blame everybody but yourself. And I just knew that for me to be as good as I could creatively be, I had to leave the industry and try something else. So that's why I jumped eventually, because as I said, I left Saatchi's in 2002 and I was broke almost immediately because I gave up my salary. I gave up a massive salary, which I didn't care about, but then when you can't pay your bills, then you have to start caring about it. Money's never been important to me. I know it's easy to say that, but it isn't important. The most important thing to me is my family, my friends, and the work I'm doing. And if the work I'm doing is anything less than something to be proud of, I'll beat myself up. And I started beating myself up big time. And when I left the industry, it sometimes worries me that people thought I'd defected or I'd kind of been disloyal to an industry that I absolutely adored.
There's no loyalty in the industry.
Yeah, but I am a loyal person. You know, I don't.
There's none corresponding back from the owners of these companies. You're only as good if you're not performing. You're out. And they don't care about you.
But I'd kind of mutated into an advertising creature that I didn't really understand anymore. I was unhappy. I was very unhappy.
And did that affect your personal life and all that?
Well, you know, it affected me in different ways. And actually, when I look back, you know, I've been down a bar talking to a client that I'm working with. And then after 10 minutes talking to the client, I've suddenly realised it's not the client I thought it was. It's somebody completely different. And then you go through this little process in your head. You're going, oh, shit. Yeah. You're not who I think you are. And what have I just said? Yeah. How much of that is he standing there thinking, where's he coming? When
did you turn to booze and stuff?
Yes. Yeah. I think, I
mean, the whole industry was about that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'd go down the pub or a wine bar with my art director, and we'd have, like, I don't know, 3 bottles of wine or something. Yeah. Then we'd try and sneak into the agency through kind of an underground, labyrinth. And I can remember one time we're doing it, and we knew that if we went down here, turned left, went around there, you know, without a ball of wool. We didn't need a ball of wool to get, you know. And then we went up the stairs, opened the door. Who did we bump into? You know, the executive creative director. And he looked at us, we looked at him, and nothing was said. But I did go home thinking, oh, God, I'd become the kind of creative I didn't respect when I was a young gun.
True, yeah.
You know,
and also you have to lead by example.
You used to look around, as a young gun, you'd look around the agency going, well, you've hung up your boots, you're moaning you know. And I kind of became that person.
So all these things came together and you went, I've had enough. Talk to me about just that Jerry Maguire moment. I think this came a bit later, but the time you just stood up and walked out.
I'd been working in an agency, and I'd been trying very hard to deliver a TV commercial for a client. It had been a tricky process because the budget was the budget, and the client wanted to shoot. He wanted autumnal feel. It wasn't autumn. To do that, you need to go to another country, and then everything started bouncing back. You know, we can't afford this, we can't do that. And when I presented the casting, the client said, I don't like the casting. So I said, well, can I just say that the consensus from our side is that this is absolutely fantastic casting. And the client said to me, this is not for discussion. And then I don't know what happened. It was like, I'm not a confrontational person. Yeah. I've never ever had a row with anybody in the business. And I don't know what happened to me, but I just stood up. I then said, I've worked my nuts off to try and deliver something. I know what I'm doing, and I'm actually pretty good at my job. And you're telling me it's not for discussion. I then got his name wrong and said, I'll tell you this, you know.
Charlie, Jeff.
And then I just said, okay. And I started shaking everybody's hands around the table, apart from his. And I said, I can't do this anymore. Goodbye. And I walked out of the...
as jaws hit the table.
I walked out of the room, and I went back to my office, and then I was called down to the managing director's office. I was told that what I'd done was a bit of a disgrace, and that I'd let everybody down. And I was asked whether I would have done it if it'd been a bigger client, and I said yes, I would have done the same thing. And I was told it was unacceptable, and that I had an hour to compose myself. So I went back to my room and sat in my room for an hour, and then I went back to the MD's room, and I said to him, okay, I've been thinking about it, and as far as I can see, I've got 2 choices. I can either let everybody down, or I can let myself down. So I'm going to let everybody down. I've decided I'm going to let everybody down. And that was pretty much it. And I went home.
Meaning you were going to walk away and not apologise?
Yes, I wasn't going to apologise.
But if I was one of the everybody, I would not be saying you were letting me down.
Well, I didn't know that I'd just reached a point where something had to give.
Yeah.
And I had two choices. I either kind of swallowed my pride and carried on doing what I was doing, and I knew inside that it wasn't the right thing to do. But of course, for me to leave advertising, I had to sell my house because I couldn't pay the bills, and I had a massive mortgage and all of that. You know, that night I went home. My wife came home. "Hi, honey, how's your day?" And I went,
"Not good.
I've left." And she was fantastic, absolutely fantastic about it. She said, "Look, you know, time for a change. We'll sell the house. I hate the house anyway. It's too big. It takes me too long to tidy it up all the time." And
it was very nice throughout your presentation today how often she came into the picture.
Yeah.
And how supportive she's been. I know lots of guys in advertising who, if they did that, their wife would probably leave them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I know it's. I started going out with my wife on the 3rd of March 1979.
Wow.
So we've known each other forever.
That's mad.
She knows what I'm like, and she's always believed in me. Even before I went into advertising, she was the person. I remember being at school, and I met a schoolmate, and his dad was in advertising. I said, "I think I'm going to advertising." He said, "You'll never make it in advertising." And I went home and said to my then girlfriend, "Well, Piers says I'll never make it in advertising."
Yeah.
She said, "Yeah, you will." So all the way through everything I've done, and all the wrong decisions I've made, and I have made some right ones, but there was a lot of wrong ones. Yeah. She's always believed in me. She's an accountant, and she's the one that had to juggle the numbers.
And they got quite big.
They got very big. I spent fortunes on ideas.
So that's phase one of Kes's life. Now it starts getting really interesting. Okay, not that wasn't interesting. Yeah. He became a children's writer, which you all know. I've asked if he wouldn't mind reading some of his picture books because they're short and they're really emotive and very nice. So introduce us to your first.
Well, I'll kick off with the book that's kind of turned my life around in the end. It's a book that took me 16 years to write. It's called I, Frog, and don't ask me why, but it's just landed in a way that 79 of my other books didn't land. Is it my favourite book? I don't know. It is now, I guess. It's certainly my wife's favourite book because it's paying the bills. I think everybody comes into the world understanding that cats sit on mats and frogs sit on logs. We all know that. It's a given. And for some reason one day I started to ask myself the question that David Attenborough has never actually nailed. What are all the other animals in the world meant to be sitting on? And it starts something like this. "Oi, frog, sit on a log," said the cat. "I don't want to sit on a log," said the frog. "Logs are all knobbly and uncomfortable and they can give you splinters in your bottom." "I don't care," said the cat. "You're a frog, so you must sit on a log." "Can't I sit on a mat?" said the frog. "Only cats sit on mats." "Well, what about a chair?" "I wouldn't mind sitting on a chair. Hares sit on chairs," said the cat. "What about a stool?" said the frog. "Mules sit on stools," said the cat. "Well, what about a sofa then? I could stretch right out on a sofa." "Gophers sit on sofas," said the cat. It's very simple, really. Cats sit on mats, hares sit on chairs, mules sit on stools, gophers sit on sofas, and frogs sit on logs. "What do lions sit on?" said the frog. "Lions sit on irons," said the cat. "Ouch," said the frog. "What about parrots?" "Parrots sit on carrots," said the cat. "Lions sit on irons and parrots sit on carrots." "Doesn't sound very comfortable," said the frog. "It's not about being comfortable," said the cat. Yeah. "It's about doing the right thing."
Brilliant. This is one of a series, Oi Frog, Oi Dog, Oi Cat and Oi Duckbill Platypus.
Oi Duckbill Platypus.
Are they all similar in construct or is it about sitting or is that just the
it's
frog
about
one?
Sitting.
The frog one has a lovely twist in the end though, listeners, so you have to buy the book to find out what happens.
Yeah.
But it is a very, very little bit sad twist in the end.
I've never actually done a sequel before because Oi Frog did very well and proved very popular. And then, of course, I was asked the question, will you do a sequel? And I said, no, I don't do sequels, because I'm always worried that a sequel won't live up to the original. My wife, who'd been watching me for the last... later. Come on, Kes, there's a chance here you might actually sell some books here. So how's about doing a sequel? And I said, no, not doing one, absolutely not. I said, and anyway, there aren't any more rhymes, And she said, that's a load of nonsense. Of course there's some more rhymes. We were going to a wedding in Wales, and she said, come on, we're going to write, we're going to do the sequel. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll drive, you get the notepad. And all the way down to Wales, we thought of some more rhymes. And I said to her, well, I'll tell you what, if we get to Wales and I've got enough rhymes for a book, I'll make you the joint author. So I did. Yeah. There were enough rhymes. I did make my wife Claire the joint author.
Great.
And I fired her shortly afterwards because she got unbearable. And then, of course, once Oi Dog happened, I was asked again to write the threequel. And I said, no, went down the pub. And by the time I come out of the pub, I had the number 3 nailed. Number 4, Duckbill Platypus, is really about the dilemma that I faced as the author, because after 3 books and after Googling every rhyming animal on the planet, I realised there weren't any more. I couldn't get another book out of it. Right. And so, of course, what happens in the new book, the frog meets a duckbill platypus, confronts the duckbill platypus immediately, and it says, oi, duckbill platypus, sit on A.
Don't tell me.
And then, of course, he looks at the cat
Something
and goes,
apparatus?
No. He looks at the cat and whispers, what sits on, what rhymes with duckbill platypus? And the cat just goes, absolutely nothing.
So it's a quest for what rhymes.
Yeah, so of course the dilemma for the frog is, what the hell is the duckbill platypus going to sit on? The duckbill platypus says, I'm waiting. And then, of course, you turn the page and there's a huge crowd of animals that go, we're all waiting too, said a large crowd of animals with impossible to rhyme with names. What are we meant to be sitting on? Yeah. And, of course, the frog has to work out what an echidna sits on, or an alligator, or a crocodile, or a hippopotamus.
Brilliant. We now have the end point. So 17 years went by before he got to the point where his 79th, 80th, 81st or whatever book was the one that hit. And there's loads of reasons why it didn't happen. And I'm just going to openly ask him, how come it took so long? What did you do?
The honest answer is I don't know, because every book I do pretty much I love. There are no magic formulas. If everybody knew what was going to make people run to the bookshop, we'd all be doing it. I think Oi Frog works on lots of levels for lots of people. I am apparently a phonics genius. I didn't even know what phonics was. I've been told it's a big phonics exercise for kids. They love it. I wasn't taught phonics at school. So if I am a phonics genius, it's completely by accident. It's all about the fun of.
Yeah, you're a phonics.
A simple phonics, yes, like that. Did I say that or did you say that?
I said that. You can have it. You're on my podcast.
Too late.
Take it.
So it kind of works for teachers, it works for mums, it works for dads, it works for,
Yeah, they're great.
It's just, the average sale of a picture book, in case you didn't know, is between 2,000 and 4,000 copies. That's not enough to earn a royalty.
Talk to me about the economics of publishing, which there'll be a lot of people who are thinking of writing a book, including myself. I'm dealing with rejection letters at the moment. Talk about the rejection letters and all that.
Rejection doesn't bother me because I'm an ad man, and you get rejection all the time. But the economics of being a picture book author are pretty grim. I think probably the first book I did, I would be paid an advance of £3,000. That would be given to me in 3 tranches. The first one would be on signature. So yeah, I'm going to do it. The second one would be on delivery. So you deliver the text. And the third £1,000 would be on publication. Thereafter, I would earn a 5% royalty on every book that is sold. The 5% royalty is not 5% of the cover price. It's 5% of price received, and price received is the price that the publishers get for the book. So if somebody asks you to discount that book by 60, 70, 80%, which happens, what that means is the author will receive 5% of the 20% that is left, which is nothing.
Zero, yeah.
It's nothing. The very first book that I ever had published was Eat Your Peas. For many years, that was my bestseller. I think it's probably sold in excess of 100,000 copies, but over 17 years or 20 years. In 4 years, the Oi books have sold over 1 million.
Really?
Over 1 million copies. And I don't know why. It's just happened.
And you did self-publish, but
Yes.
we'll talk about how you did that later.
Yeah.
But is it better now for somebody like you, or someone who's trying to get into picture storybooks for kids, to start with self-publish? Or is it better to have the distribution and the
I
backup?
wouldn't. Yeah, self-publishing isn't a good idea. I don't think, unless you're if you're publishing online, and I have to say I'm a techno numpty, and I don't really get all that stuff. At least your overheads are smaller. But if you're going to self-publish, you can't just ring up a factory somewhere and say, "Oh, can I have 7 copies?" They'll go, "No, you're going to have 7,000 copies or 2,000 copies, but you can't have 7 copies because the economics just don't work. They're not right." The one picture book that I self-published, I had to import 2,000 or 3,000 copies. An awful lot of those books are still sitting in a farmer's barn in a steel storage unit because, and I love the book, and maybe I'll read an extract, in a moment. I love the book. It's one of my favourite books. But if you don't have distribution, if you don't have, the bookshops on your side.
So we're going to get a little Lost Beatles track kind of thing here from you, are we? This book, you're going to read a little excerpt from. Let's do that. Your second one, the little excerpt from the book that you love.
Okay. Well, this is again. It's built around an observation, and the observation was something that I'm sure lots of parents have probably experienced. Your little boy, your little girl is in the bath. They have a bath. They come out of the bath. You tell them to put their pajamas on, and suddenly they go very silly and decide that actually they don't want to put their pajamas on. In fact, all they want to do is run around the house stark naked. And my eldest son did that. And when he was running around the house being super naked, man, I suddenly thought, do you know what? It's been a long time since I've seen a streaker on the television. Because when I was a kid, you couldn't watch anything without somebody naked running through the. It was like happened at cricket.
Famous girl. What was her name? Who ran across
Erica Rowe. Erica Rowe. Where is she now?
Yeah.
So
whatever happened to streaking? Send me an email. Anyone listening?
Yeah. So I took the idea of streaking, a little boy streaking, and I took it as far as I could take it. The book is called Nuddy Ned. I'll read you a little bit now. Busy in the bedroom making up Ned's bed, there was Mum and there was Dad, but where was Nuddy Ned? Ned was in the bathroom, standing on the mat, all clean and fresh and sparkling. Thank Bubble Bath for that. Your Jimmy Jams are on the shelf, your bathrobe's by the door, and don't leave talcum powder footprints on the floor. Ned looked in the mirror and did a little wiggle. He waved his arms and jumped about and then began to giggle. His heart filled up with naughtiness, his eyes began to flash. He did a hop and then a skip and then he made a dash. Yahoo, said Ned. Wahey, said Ned. They don't teach this at school. Life is far more interesting with nothing on at all. Mum and Dad came running out and watched with open jaws as Ned ran naked round the house, slamming all the doors. Our crazy son has lost the plot. No ounce of sense remains. Maybe all the bubble bath has soaked into his brains. Ned did nutty cartwheels and star jumps willy-nilly. He'd never felt so loopy-loo. He'd never been so silly. Put some clothes on, get dressed now, don't you be so bold. Ned's mum and dad were not impressed, but Ned would not be told. I'm Nuddy Ned, Jim Jams aren't for me. I'm never wearing clothes again, it's the nuddy life for me. Ned leapt across the sofa and raced into the hall, then charged out through the front door with nothing on at all.
So, that's Nuddy Ned. Now, immediately, you preface this in your talk about the sensitive nature of child running around naked, which back to our earlier conversation about mollycoddling kids and overprotecting them.
Well, I get I've had letters from parents saying that's so my son.
Yeah,
that's so my. I'm not gratuitously implying that children should be running down the high street with no clothes on through the precinct and through the Pizza Hut house and all that stuff. I, as an author, as a children's author, I listen a lot. I listen to my kids. I listen to their friends. I've got a very, very good memory for what it was like to be, their age. If I listen to my kids or I watch my kids and they do something that makes me laugh, I think that's fair game. And I think I can build a book around that. And it's not a book for everybody. I don't think I should ever have to apologise for writing a book that isn't everybody's cup of tea. In fact, I quite like writing stuff that maybe isn't everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, when I listened to it, I thought about the King Emperor's New Clothes.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the son of, so to speak. But, know, and it was a child who called out the Emperor for being in the nip. Not all the courtiers and all the people.
Yeah.
And then they all went, the kid's right, so out of the mouth of babes. Yeah. And also the joy of the naughtiness of that. Like kids, when they run around naked, know they're being naughty.
Yes, they do.
And I'm not going to be too much of a spoiler, but at the end, the kid tends to win his parents over.
He does. But actually, I think that's one of the funniest books I've ever written.
Yeah, I love it.
And I'm very proud of it. I left advertising because the only ideas I was having at the time were advertising related. And for a long, long time, I've always tried to think in as many directions as I could. Advertising doesn't actually allow you to do that. You know, if you walk into a sweet shop and you look at the sweetie bar, I would love the brief, come up with a new chocolate bar. Come up with a sweet that no one's ever seen before. You know, walk into Sainsbury's and look at the shelves. Look at the ready meals, you go, I'd love to come up with a ready meal. I'd love to... I don't think there is a brief that I wouldn't take on unless it's a really heavy. If it's a technology brief, I am going to struggle because that's not my bag at all. But
perversely, if I was running a technology product, you'd be the first person I put on it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because I think the biggest problem in that area is it's too many people who know too much about shit that if you can make it make sense to you, then you can advertise it to everybody, you know.
Maybe.
This whole idea of having tech experience to work on tech to me is ridiculous. But anyway, go on.
Well,
sorry for interrupting.
So when I eventually left advertising, I set off on what I thought was a kind of single-minded course, but I had to sell my house to be able to pay my bills, to put myself in a position where I could write books. But the moment I'd sold my house, I had a little windfall, because obviously I sold a big house and downsized, and that put money in the bank. And the moment I had money in the bank, I just thought, hang on, what other ideas can I have, and in how many different directions? Over the next 8 years, I went on what I called this morning an ideas rampage. I started an ideas company. As a joke, because there was only me, I was the only member of staff, I made myself creative emperor. That was a big mistake, because if you ever hand a card to somebody with the words creative emperor on it, they think you're a total twat.
They don't see the irony.
They don't see the irony, and I didn't mean it to be like, but I'd been through a period in advertising where I'd watch people being so obsessed with titles. And I used to watch it. It was like battling tops.
It's worse in America.
Everybody,
Vice President.
Well, what are you? Yeah, what are you? Okay, well, I'm going to be Vice Admiral or
Rear
something.
Admiral, more like.
So I made myself creative emperor. I was the only one on the team. The beauty of that is I was never wrong.
Yeah.
And if I had some money in the bank, I could develop things to a point. I tried to point myself at the clothing industry, the fashion industry, the toy industry, the confectionery industry, the music industry, the contemporary art industry.
You don't just have ideas, you have them fleshed out, drawn up, ready to rock, which is scary.
Now the thing is, it gave me an opportunity to visualize everything. I'm pretty good at that, but I need a Mac operator who can I can sit down with the designer. And of course, at the end of every idea that I developed, he billed me, as he should do. And of course, over time, my poor old wife would suddenly go, "What's this bill for?" And I go, "Oh, well, it's not a soap on a rope, it's something else on a rope." And I think it would really
it's a
pope on a rope, or a taupe on a rope. And this happened over a course of 8 years.
The money just dwindled.
The money just disappeared. You can't import 12,500 toys and start a toy company without spending a lot of money. You can't self-publish without spending a lot of money.
You did have an employee called the Great Biscuito.
Yeah, so the when I go into schools and talk to kids, if you just stand in front of an assembly full of children and go, "Hello, let's talk about my books." If your books are funny, then okay, they'll go with it. But I believe, especially if you've got year sixes, they're the oldest kids in the and they are a cut above everybody. They sit on a bench quite often. All the other kids are cross-legged on the floor. You need to go into assembly hall and you need to win their respect. So I'm not going to win their respect piling in with my books. So I tell them that I have Jedi combat skills, or I am an X-Man. I'm called Bisquito, and I have the ability to save the world with biscuits, because I can flick biscuits a very long way. I've been to a summer fete at a school. This is the God's honest truth. And I have had children on one side of the school building waiting for me to throw a rich tea biscuit over the school building.
Brilliant.
They are on the other side waiting for it to come through the air like a spaceship.
The great Biscuito displayed his talents in his speech today, and he can flick biscuits. I would imagine he could flick a biscuit 50 metres, I'd say, halfway down a running track, with some venom, so that they take an eye out if you're not careful.
It doesn't always go down well, I say. If I do that in schools, I didn't mention this. I was in one school. I'd flicked a cream cracker at the length of the assembly hall. It hit some curtains, fell on the floor, broke into pieces, and all the year sixes at the back got a bit overexcited about it. I then moved on to a rich tea. Suddenly, somebody down the perimeter of the assembly hall stood up and left the room, and I wonder who she is. Anyway, she left. She was the headmistress. Within probably 5 minutes of me carrying on with it, I moved on to ginger nuts, and she suddenly came back in to
with a dustpan,
with a cleaner. She brought a cleaner in with a dustpan. Well, not a dustpan, a broom,
that'd be a great sketch, yeah.
And I actually don't tell teachers what I'm going to do, and I try and avoid eye contact. But I tell you, on that occasion, I went all hot, because you think, oh,
you're in trouble.
I'm in trouble, and I'm probably going to get told off afterwards.
You never grew up, did you?
I didn't grow up. No, I didn't.
Isn't that great though? It's the one thing I never want to do is fully grow up.
Yeah.
Still be a kid about stuff, and maybe throw tantrums every now and then. But just
to write children's books, you have to be rooted in your childhood. You have to. If you've forgotten, or if you've lost touch with your childhood and your memories. Yeah. My memories of being a kid were so acute, really strange.
Very, very deep memories.
You have to retain that to write for children. Probably shouldn't say this, but I don't write for children. I write for me, and I hope very much that children will enjoy. But I don't set out to. I don't have an agenda when I write my books. Well, if I do have an agenda, it's how much fun can I have? How lateral can I be?
We have to round the circle, and Pints have taken up loads of your time with the story of your daughter, which we mentioned earlier. We have to round the circle, because I didn't mention it at the top of the podcast. Yeah. One of the ideas Kes did was...
It was Bad Teddy. Bad Teddy. As I say, I'm still very much in touch with my childhood. I had 3 cuddly toys as a kid. One was my teddy, one was my panda, and one was my monkey. I still have them. They're reunited after all this time. They sit in my cupboard. I don't know why I did this, but I had this kind of dark kind of idea that my beloved teddy could suddenly kind of transform into something a little bit dangerous and a bit, psychotic. So my son Jack is a photographer. I got him round to the house and said, look, I want to do 4 photographs of my teddy, but he's Bad Teddy. And when Bad Teddy gets going, he really does things he shouldn't do. One of the images, it was a chopping board. There was a toy duck on the chopping board, and a kitchen knife thrust through the toy duck's heart. Bad Teddy was behind the chopping board, and you knew he'd done it. Another one was a picture of Bad Teddy sitting alongside my daughter's favourite dolly, and Bad Teddy had a lipstick in his paw, and he'd completely defaced my daughter's dolly's face, drawn around and around and around and around all over this beautiful dolly's face. I thought it was really funny, and so did my son. But then, of course, I looked at my watch, and my daughter was coming home from school in 5 minutes, and she didn't know what I'd done to her dolly. So, of course, I hurriedly got the doll and tried to wipe the lipstick off, but it wouldn't come off.
Yeah.
I then got bleach, and of course my daughter walked through into the house. I think she was probably about 8 at the time, something like 8, 9. And there was her dolly. It was like I don't know how you describe it really. Her face.
Those movie scenes where girls lose their shit and they they cut their hair with shears and they cover themselves in clown rouge. It was like that.
Yeah, I couldn't get the lipstick off, and my daughter was absolutely furious. She couldn't believe I'd done that. And of course, in my presentation today,
10 years later,
I don't have computer skills. My daughter always helps me out with my presentations, PowerPoints, and of course I found Bad Teddy in my files, buried in my files, got them out, and not only did she kind of get the shivers when a reminder of what I'd done to her dolly, she then looked at another one of the images we'd taken, and it was Bad Teddy with a box of matches on the floor and a single match in his paw, and to the right of Bad Teddy, sitting on the floor, was her tiny little white, tiny teddy. But I'd set fire to him. I'd set fire to her teddy. And she never realised, she never missed the teddy. And there she was at 17 years old, looking at this picture going, well, I can't tell you what she said, but she was absolutely horrified that I'd done that.
Bad Teddy also has a great look about him.
He does. He has those kind of...
The central casting.
You can't read his eyes. You can't read his eyes.
Myself and my girlfriend, you'll meet. We'll go and have a drink with her.
Yeah.
We have... she has 2 kids, but we have a pink unicorn called Tracy. That's a they. She's gender fluid, and she comes everywhere with us. And we photograph... Like, if we're in a posh restaurant with friends, and like my girl's a little bit younger than me, and it's kind of a bit... Is this Sean's new girl with the teddy? but we have, it's a bit like the gnome that goes around the world. Tracy's everywhere. Yes. Tracy got kidnapped in Australia, was posted back, and so everyone now looks at us as these kind of fucking weird couple with our pink, and we love it. And it's the people who come out on Facebook who love it. Yeah. They take just joy out of the stupidity and the puerility out of it. But there's a lot of other people who I know are going, Sean, for fuck's sake, man. Yeah. And they're mainly people who are parents with kids and looking at me going, Sean, would you ever grow up, would you? Would you stop fucking around now with the old toys? Yeah. You know?
Well, I'll tell you what I do is I'll dead snowmen. I've done them as well. Dead snowmen.
Dead snowmen isn't melted.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so
just a few things on the
so like a friend of mine, John, my one of my previous art directors, I drew loads of dead snowmen scenarios. And he went off and he's shot 6 of them, I think.
Yeah.
It's a beach. There's a towel. There's 2 sticks. There's a carrot. And there's 2 pieces of coal. And there's a damp towel.
Lovely.
There's a really damp towel. And if you run with that idea, you'd be amazed what you can come up with for dead snowmen. And
I want to talk to you. We have Knife Kitty. So Knife Kitty's not unlike Bad Teddy. Right. We get today. So Knife Kitty says. So Knife Kitty. We're talking about that.
Sounds like a movie.
That's Knife Kitty's. Knife Kitty might stroke you like this, not like this. Yeah, you know, you had waterbed. You have no waterbed.
Yeah.
All right, last question, because I know you've been very kind to give me so much of your time. What do you say to the kid, you? What do you say to the kid? What do you say to the 12-year-old you, 13, 15, whatever time you want to pick in your formative years? You said it was a happy childhood. You said, I can feel so much of your childhood coming out in your work, mischief and playfulness.
Yeah.
What would you say to that young kid if you're looking back?
You know, when I went into advertising, I couldn't speak in a meeting. You know, a very self-conscious kiddie. I had a very unhappy senior school. I didn't like the dynamic of it. I'd come from junior school where everything, there was an innocence about junior school that the moment I stepped into senior school, it changed. Everybody, instead of just getting on with each other, started to become very critical of it. You know, everyone formed cliques. Everyone, do you think you can beat this person up?
How cool are you?
Yeah, and I hated senior school. And I think I would say to that person, because I think there are probably kids who are in the same boat as me, you know, just don't worry. It's not the end of the world. You know, when you're 10, you can't imagine being 14. I'm 58 now. And I'm as happy as I've ever been.
Brilliant.
I'm as productive as I've ever been. Although it's hard to kind of imagine yourself getting through stuff.
Yeah.
You can and you will. And, you know, that's what I would say to that kid. Because You know, you need someone to come and sometimes put your arm around you, go, it's going to be all right. And I remember my dad doing that once, although he didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
I do remember him coming into my bedroom one day and just going, are you all right? You know.
Nice. Play us out with one of your books.
Okay, I'm going to, as I've always tried to go places that other authors or poets haven't been. Studied Keats and Shelley and Wordsworth and all the great poets. And I suddenly realised that I'd hit upon a subject that none of them had actually touched upon, and that subject is toenails. And I've written a poem very aptly called Toenails, and I won't read all of it, but it goes a bit like this. When we cut them, we don't know where on earth our toenails go. Toenails rocket through the air, they can land up anywhere. Toenails ping, toenails zing, toenails are most interesting. Forget about your nice neat piles, rock hard toenails go for miles. Whiz through bathrooms, ping off beds, fly through windows, bounce off sheds. Left uncut they'll grow and grow, but when you snip them, off they go. Did you know my Auntie Nellie found 3 toenails in her jelly? A next door neighbour, Mr. Freer, found a toenail in his ear. Then there was a boy called Paul who found one in his desk at school. Mountain climber Horatio Sproat found one on a mountain goat. Window cleaner Henry Sedge found 2 on a window ledge. I've even heard a High Court judge found some in a bag of fudge. An astronaut high up in space saw one float right past his face. The biggest toenail I have found stood 15 metres off the ground. At first I thought it was a boulder, but actually 'twas something older. A fossil from the days of yore, scissored from a dinosaur. Imagine your surprise response if that had landed on your bonce. 20 tons and sharp at that, it could have squashed a caveman flat. Today the good news for us all is toenails tend to be quite small. So let them wing and ping and zing, airborne flight is just their thing. Toenails mean no harm, mind you. Be careful when you pass the zoo. Why? Because the rhinos might be cutting their toenails. Do you know what a rhino's toenails are made of?
Keratin?
Concrete.
Concrete.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes.
That was Kes Gray, the king of phonetics. I got you on that one. Look after yourself. Keep making kids smile and keep making kids happy.
I'll do my best. Lovely having a chat.
Thanks, man.